Let me tell you about the two great loves of my life. The first was my wife Clara. The second is a stubborn, weathered, slightly leaning patch of timber and stone nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains that she named Whispering Pines. It's not a cabin, it's a member of the family. A creaky, drafty, deeply sentimental member who occasionally needs a new roof. My name is Frank, and I'm 72 years young. Clara and I bought that land with pocket change and a mountain of hope 50 years ago. We built the cabin with our own hands, our own sweat, and more than a few of my own hammer-related thumb injuries. Our daughter Chloe took her first steps on that porch. We spent every summer there, the air thick with the smell of pine and bug spray. It was our sanctuary. When Clara passed, the cabin became my tether to her. It's where I feel her presence most. It's also, according to my daughter, a money pit. Chloe is what you'd call aspirationally metropolitan. She lives in a glass and chrome apartment in the city, where the only thing whispering is the smart speaker. To her, the cabin is an embarrassment, a relic. "Dad, be realistic," she'd said during her last visit, which consisted of her standing in the living room for 10 minutes, not touching anything. "This place is worthless. The plumbing is prehistoric, the roof is a bird sanctuary, and the nearest decent coffee is a 40-minute drive. You're throwing good money after bad." I'd looked around at the heart pine walls I'd sanded myself, at the stone fireplace I'd mortared. "It's worth more than you know, Chloe." She'd sighed, the long-suffering sigh of someone explaining blockchain to a golden retriever. "It's sentimental value, Dad. That doesn't pay the property taxes." I met with a realtor. "We could get maybe $80,000 for the land. That's a nice nest egg for you." We. She'd already made it a team sport, the team of her and my future comfort, versus me and my stubborn attachment to a shack. The final blow came a month ago. She'd orchestrated a family intervention with her husband, Mark, a man so bland I'm pretty sure his spirit animal is beige wallpaper. "Frank," Mark had said, using his best, soothing voice, "Chloe's just worried. This place is a liability. What if you fall? The equity is just sitting here, dormant." "Like my enthusiasm for this conversation," I'd muttered. Chloe played her trump card. Tears. "I just want you to be safe, Daddy. I can't sleep at night worrying about you up here all alone. If you sell, you can move closer to us." It was a masterful performance, a blend of financial logic and emotional blackmail so potent it should be bottled and sold. Worn down, outnumbered, and genuinely wondering if I was just a sentimental old fool, I finally, reluctantly, agreed. I signed the papers. She sold my cabin, my memories, my tether to Clara, for $85,000.
She deposited the money into my account with the triumphant air of someone who just saved me from myself. She stood in my kitchen, beaming. "See, Dad? Now you're free of that worthless old place." I just nodded, my heart feeling like one of the stones from the fireplace. She had no idea what she'd just done, but she was about to find out. The days after the sale were educational. It's one thing to know your child sees you as a slightly malfunctioning ATM. It's another to watch her do a full celebratory dance on your soul's grave. Chloe was practically buzzing with the kind of energy usually reserved for lottery winners and people who've just found a forgotten 20 in their winter coat. She'd call me every other day, her voice dripping with a syrupy, self-congratulatory concern that made my teeth ache. "Just checking in, Dad. Isn't it a relief not to have to worry about that leaky faucet anymore?" she'd chirp. I'd stare at the perfectly functional, non-leaky faucet in my city apartment. "Or the squirrels in the attic," she'd continue. I'd look around my squirrel-free living room. It was so quiet you could hear a dream die. Her husband, Mark, the human beige alert, even tried to bond with me over it. "You made a very savvy financial decision, Frank," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder like he was congratulating a puppy for not piddling on the rug. Liquidating a non-performing asset is key to a healthy portfolio. I had to resist the urge to ask if his portfolio included a personality. They took me out to a celebration dinner at a restaurant so trendy the menu didn't have descriptions, just emotional states. I ordered the nostalgic longing. It turned out to be a deconstructed beet salad. I spent 85 grand and all I got was a plate of existential disappointment and a side of roasted regret. Chloe, meanwhile, was already spending the money she'd saved me. Not on me, of course. Oh no, she was talking about a wellness sabbatical in Sedona and upgrading her car. She saw that money as hers, just temporarily parked in my account, waiting for the right moment to be transferred via guilt or my eventual demise. I felt like the punchline of a joke I hadn't been told. I'd lost my sanctuary, my connection to my wife, and in return, I got a beet salad and a front row seat to my daughter's spending spree. The only thing whispering now was my will to live, and it was saying, "Frank, you're an idiot." But then, a week after the sale, just as I was seriously considering using my nest egg to buy a one-way ticket to anywhere without cell service, my doorbell rang. It wasn't Chloe. It wasn't a food delivery. Standing on my welcome mat was a man in a hard hat and a fluorescent vest, holding a clipboard and looking like he'd just won the geological lottery. "Franklin Oldman?" he asked, his voice brimming with an excitement usually reserved for finding a full set of vintage baseball cards in your attic. "It's Oldman," I corrected, "but close enough. What can I do for you?" He grinned, extending a hand. "Sir, my name is Dave Cooper, with Black Gold Geological Surveys. I was just up at your property off Route 7, the old Whispering Pines cabin." My heart did a little stutter step. "That's not my property anymore. I sold it." Dave's smile didn't falter. It widened. It became a thing of beauty, a glorious sunbeam of a smile. "I know, sir. We tried the new owner, but they weren't home. We just finished our preliminary survey." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing the secret of the universe. "Mr. Oldman, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're sitting on an ocean." I blinked. "I'm in a third-floor apartment." "Not here," he laughed. "Up there. On that land you just sold." "Sir, the preliminary core samples indicate one of the most promising new shale oil deposits we've seen in this state in 20 years. We're talking life-changing." He handed me a business card and a preliminary report. The numbers on it had more zeros than my lifetime of tax returns. "The new owner is going to be a very, very wealthy individual," Dave said, shaking his head in what looked like genuine sympathy for me. "A shame you sold when you did." He tipped his hard hat and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway, holding a piece of paper that said my daughter hadn't just sold a cabin. She'd sold a king's ransom, and she'd sold it for a plate of deconstructed beets. The moment Dave the geological Santa Claus left, the world took on a strange, slow-motion quality. I closed the door, leaned against it, and looked at the preliminary report in my hand. The numbers weren't just large. They were comical. They were the kind of numbers that make Scrooge McDuck look like a frugal coupon clipper. My first thought wasn't, "I'm rich." It was, Chloe sold the rights to a modern-day El Dorado for the price of a mid-range sports car. The irony was so thick, you could drill for oil in it. I did what any sane man would do in this situation. I made a pot of coffee so strong it could have been used to frack the oil out of the ground itself. Then I sat at my kitchen table, the report laid out before me like a sacred text. and I planned. This wasn't just about money. This was about justice. This was about the universe handing me the ultimate "I told you so." I couldn't just call Chloe and say, "Hey, remember that worthless money pit?" Turns out it's basically the Saudi Arabia of North Carolina. Where's the drama in that? Where's the poetic justice? No, this required finesse. This required the patience of a saint and the subtlety of a wrecking ball. The phone rang. Speak of the devil. It was Chloe. "Hi, Daddy. Just wanted to see how you're settling in. Isn't it nice not to be surrounded by all that wood?" I took a slow sip of my industrial strength coffee. "It's very smooth, Chloe. All the surfaces are very smooth." I looked around my laminate countertopped kitchen. No unexpected textures. "I knew you'd love it," she trilled. "Oh, by the way, Mark and I were thinking of taking a little trip to Tuscany. You know, to really unwind after all the stress of managing your affairs." My affairs. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. She'd managed my affairs right out of an oil fortune. "That sounds lovely, honey," I said, my voice a masterpiece of grandfatherly calm. "You deserve it." I could practically feel her preening through the phone. We chatted for a few more minutes about her thrilling life and my blessedly simple one. I didn't mention the report. I didn't mention Dave. I let her have her moment. The higher she flew, the harder she would fall. After I hung up, I went for a walk. I passed a jewelry store and saw a necklace in the window that Clara would have loved. I passed a car dealership and saw the exact model of pickup truck I'd always dreamed of, the one with the cup holders big enough for a proper thermos. For the first time since she'd passed, thinking about these things didn't bring a pang of sadness. It brought a quiet, determined smile. I wasn't a sad old man in a quiet apartment anymore. I was a dormant volcano. Chloe, Mark, and their realtor were picnicking on the slopes, complaining about the view, completely unaware that the ground was about to get very, very hot. The next move was mine, and I knew exactly how to play it. I was going to let them get on that plane to Tuscany. I was going to let them drink their overpriced Chianti and take smug photos in front of a leaning tower. I was going to let them believe, with every fiber of their being, that they were so clever. Because the best revenge isn't just getting what they lost. It's letting them realize what they lost, all on their own. Watching Chloe and Mark prepare for their well-deserved Tuscany trip was like watching a nature documentary about particularly smug peacocks. The preening was epic. Chloe bought no less than 3 new suitcases and a wardrobe of flowy linen outfits, all while lamenting the financial strain of it all. Mark purchased a high-tech travel pillow that he claimed was NASA engineered for optimal nap dynamics. I half expected him to try and bill me for it. They came over the night before their flight for a bon voyage dinner. Chloe spent most of it giving my apartment a critical once-over. "You know, Dad, we could really brighten this place up with some accent lighting," she mused, tapping a wall. "Maybe a nice, vibrant beige." I just nodded, chewing my lasagna with the serene smile of a man who knows where all the tectonic plates are buried. "You two just focus on having a wonderful time," I said, my voice oozing paternal warmth. "Eat some pasta. Drink some wine. Forget all your worries, especially the multi-million-dollar one you don't know you have," I thought, taking a generous sip of my wine. It was a $10 bottle, but it tasted like victory. The next morning, I stood at my window and watched their Uber whisk them away to the airport. The second their car turned the corner, I sprang into action. Well, sprang might be an overstatement. I achieved a state of purposeful, determined motion, like a sloth that just discovered caffeine. Phase 1 of Operation Black Gold was a go. My first call wasn't to a lawyer or a financial advisor. It was to my old fishing buddy, Jerry, who also happens to be the best private investigator south of the Mason-Dixon line. Jerry, it's Frank. I need a favor. I need you to find out who bought the Whispering Pines cabin. And I need to know everything about them. Their favorite color, their dental records, if they prefer crunchy or smooth peanut butter. The works. Jerry, a man of few words, just grunted. On it. You win the lottery or something? Or something, I said, a grin spreading across my face. Just make it quick. The new owners are about to have a very interesting week. While Jerry worked his magic, I did some digging of my own. The property records showed the cabin had been purchased by a young couple from the city, the Millers. They were digital nomads, whatever that meant. Their online presence was a curated gallery of artisanal coffee, hiking photos, and vague inspirational quotes. They'd probably bought my cabin to use as a backdrop for their Instagram lifestyle. The irony was almost too perfect. 2 days later, just as Chloe was presumably posting a photo of her feet by a Tuscan pool, Jerry called back. Got 'em, he said. Tim and Sarah Miller. He designs apps for counting your steps. She makes vegan cheese that tastes, and I quote from a review, vaguely of disappointment and sawdust. They paid cash, financed by a trust fund. They're clueless, Frank. Absolutely clueless. It was better than I could have hoped for. The new owners weren't corporate raiders. They were blissfully ignorant yuppies who saw my home as a rustic photo op. Perfect, I whispered. Now for the fun part. I hung up and looked at the business card Dave from Black Gold Surveys had given me. It was time to make a call. But not to Dave. Oh no, I had a much better idea. I was going to call a local news reporter I knew. If you're going to break news about a massive oil strike, you might as well get a front page story out of it. The clock was ticking. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Chloe was dreaming of pasta. And somewhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a fortune in black gold was waiting to make someone very, very rich. I just had to make sure the right people found out at exactly the right time. My next move required the precision of a heart surgeon and the subtlety of a fireworks display. I couldn't just call the news. I had to craft a leak so tantalizing, so perfectly timed, it would spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. I reached out to Brenda, a relentlessly cheerful, local news reporter I'd once saved from being locked in a porta potty at the county fair. She owed me one. Brenda, Frank Oldman, I've got a tip for you. It's a big one. The kind that gets you off the lost puppy beat and onto the 6 o'clock news. I could hear her sit up straighter. I'm listening, Frank. Remember that old Whispering Pines cabin up on Route 7? The one my daughter just sold for scrap value? The worthless money pit? She asked, her reporter instincts humming. Turns out it's sitting on top of the biggest oil strike this state has seen since Jed Clampett was a boy, I said, laying it on thick. Black Gold Surveys confirmed it. Preliminary estimates are, let's just say, the new owners, a couple of lovely city kids named the Millers, won't be making vegan cheese for a living much longer. There was a sharp intake of breath. You're kidding me. Frank, this is huge. Do they know? Now, Chloe, I said, my tone gently chiding. "We have no proof of that. They made an offer, and you, in your infinite financial wisdom, advised me to take it. You said it was a fantastic deal. You said I was free." I let the words hang in the air, each one a little hammer tap on the coffin of her argument. She had no rebuttal. There was no one to blame but herself, and the reality was sinking in like a stone in a pond. "So, that's it?" Mark asked, his voice small. "There's nothing we can do?" "Well," I said, leaning back and steepling my fingers, "I did have a long, interesting chat with a lawyer. A very good one. A real shark. He said that unless we can prove outright fraud, which we can't, the property and everything under it belongs to the new owners. The law is very clear." The hope drained from their faces, replaced by a sickly gray despair. "But," I continued, as if a new thought had just occurred to me, "he did mention one thing. He said that sometimes, in these situations, the energy companies will offer a signing bonus to the previous owner as a gesture of goodwill, especially if there's a sentimental story involved. You know, to avoid bad press." Two pairs of eyes locked onto me with the intensity of laser pointers. A signing bonus?" Chloe whispered, looking like a parched wanderer who'd just spotted a mirage of a water fountain. "Yes," I said, nodding sagely. "Could be a sizable sum. Not billions, of course, but life-changing in its own right." I let the implication hang in the air, a shimmering, tantalizing carrot on a very long stick. They were hooked. I could see the gears turning, the desperate calculation. They'd lost the kingdom, but maybe, just maybe, they could still get a castle out of it. "Of course," I added, "any negotiations would have to go through me. I am, after all, the sentimental previous owner." For the first time since they'd sold my soul for a handful of beans, my daughter looked at me not as a burden, but as an asset. The vultures were back, but this time I was the one holding the bait. And I had absolutely no intention of sharing a single oily penny. Watching Chloe and Mark try to be nice to me was like watching two cats try to do algebra. It was all concentrated effort and fundamentally against their nature. The Tuscany tranquility had been replaced by desperate sycophancy. Chloe started showing up with casseroles. Not good ones, mind you. They were the kind of casseroles that screamed, "I looked up a recipe 5 minutes ago and substituted half the ingredients." One of them had canned tuna and cornflakes on top. I'm pretty sure it was a cry for help. Mark, meanwhile, tried to bond with me over manly pursuits. He bought a toolbox, a shiny red, completely unscratched thing that looked like it had never met a screwdriver, and offered to fix things around my apartment. The man tried to tighten the screws on my doorknob and nearly took the whole thing off its hinges. I had to shoo him away before he accidentally declared structural war on my plumbing. "Dad," Chloe said one afternoon, her voice dripping with a honey so fake I was surprised bees weren't trying to reclaim it. "We were thinking about that signing bonus the lawyer mentioned. Have you heard anything?" I took a slow, deliberate bite of her latest culinary crime, a shepherd's pie that tasted like regret and ground beef. Not yet," I said, chewing thoughtfully. "These things take time. Big oil moves at the speed of bureaucracy, not a panic in Tuscany." She flinched. "Good." "But," I continued, watching her lean forward, "I did have a very interesting call with a gentleman from Petrogiant. He said they're very keen to avoid a David and Goliath narrative in the press. They want the local community on their side." Her eyes widened. "So, there's a chance?" "Oh, I'd say there's more than a chance," I said, waving my fork. He used the word sizable. He also used the word discretionary, which is corporateese for, "We can make this number as big or as small as we want, depending on how much you annoy us." I let that sink in. I had them exactly where I wanted them, dangling on a string of my own invention, terrified to twitch for fear of losing a fortune they'd never actually had. The funniest part was the sudden, intense interest in my legacy. Chloe dug out old photo albums I hadn't seen in years. "Look, Dad, here's you and Mom building the porch. You were so strong," she'd call, pointing at a picture of my younger self, shirtless and sunburned, looking like a confused lobster holding a hammer. "Look at this one. You teaching me to fish?" she'd say, pointing to a photo of a 4-year-old Chloe crying because a sunfish had touched her shoe. It was a museum of manipulated nostalgia, and she was the world's most transparent curator. She wasn't remembering the good times, she was inventorying assets. I played along, of course. I'd get a misty look in my eye. "Your mother loved that porch," I'd sigh. "She said the wood had soul." Chloe would nod vigorously, scribbling notes on a legal pad she'd started carrying. I think she was writing down keywords to use in her bonus negotiation. Porch, soul, mom, grief, money please. They were putting on the performance of their lives for a payoff that existed only in the fertile fictional landscape of my imagination. And I had a front row seat to the whole glorious hypocritical show. The best part was, the longer I strung them along, the more of their own money they spent trying to butter me up. That toolbox alone probably cost Mark $200. The vegan cheese couple were about to be richer than Croesus, and my children were over here performing emotional gymnastics for a phantom bonus. The irony was so beautiful, it brought a tear to my eye. A single, manly, utterly triumphant tear. After 2 weeks of the most excruciatingly sycophantic behavior this side of a royal court, I decided it was time to throw them a bone. A very, very small, meticulously polished bone. I called a family meeting. They arrived so quickly, I think they must have been camped in the parking lot. Chloe was practically vibrating, and Mark had traded his useless toolbox for a brand new, leather-bound portfolio, presumably to look more negotiation-ready. "Children," I began, my face a mask of solemn gravity. "I've heard from the lawyers." You could have heard a pin drop, or the sound of their hearts pounding in unison. "The folks at Petro Giant, in a show of tremendous goodwill, have agreed to a discretionary bonus for the previous property owner, that's me, in recognition of the emotional hardship involved." Chloe's hands were clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white. How much, Dad?" I took a deep, dramatic pause, drawing out the moment. I looked from her hopeful face to Mark's tense one. $100,000, I said, my voice soft as if announcing a tragedy. The silence was profound. It was the sound of a popped balloon, a deflated dream. 100,000, Chloe whispered, the number sounding pathetic in the air. "But Dad, the oil is worth billions." "I know, honey," I said, shaking my head with feigned sadness. But their legal team was very firm. They said any more could be seen as an admission of prior knowledge or undue influence, and open them up to a lawsuit from us. This way, it's just a clean, generous gesture, a token. Mark finally exploded, his bland facade cracking. "Frank, that's a rounding error. It's an insult." I gave him my best, "what can you do?" shrug. It's the best they're willing to do. The lawyer said we could try to fight it, but that would cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees with no guarantee of success. He advised against it, strongly. I let them marinate in the bitter stew of their own disappointment. Chloe looked like she'd just been told her favorite designer store was replacing everything with burlap sacks. Mark just stared into the middle distance, probably calculating how many neutral-toned throw pillows $100,000 could buy. Spoiler, a lot, but not enough to cushion this blow. "So," Chloe said, her voice hollow. "What now?" "Well," I said, leaning back, "the check will be made out to me, of course, and after taxes, it'll be a bit less. But it's something." I gave them a gentle, paternal smile. I was thinking I might use it to take a nice long trip, maybe see the world a little. Their faces were a perfect portrait of agony. They'd spent weeks catering to my every whim, eating terrible casseroles, and pretending to care about my legacy, all for a sliver of the fortune they'd so carelessly tossed away. The poetic justice was so exquisite it was almost a shame to end it. But every good show needs a finale. And who knows, I added, as if an afterthought. Maybe I'll buy a little piece of land somewhere. Nothing fancy, just a quiet spot. I've learned my lesson about getting too attached to property. I watched the final flicker of hope die in their eyes. They'd lost the oil, they'd lost the bonus, and now they were losing the chance to ever guilt me out of another dime. It was a clean sweep. As they shuffled out defeated, I picked up the phone. It was time to make a real call. Not to a lawyer or a reporter. It was time to call the Millers, the real winners in this little drama. I had a proposition for them, a way to turn their unbelievable luck into something that would truly honor the land my Clara had loved. But that, as they say, is a story for another day. With the tragic comedy of Chloe and Mark's dashed hopes drawing to a close, I felt a chapter ending. The air in my apartment, once thick with the scent of desperation and bad casserole, was now clear. I was free, and I had a pocket full of righteous indignation and a hankering to do something truly absurd with my newfound, well, not wealth, but certainly my newfound peace. So I did what any self-respecting, slightly petty, recently vindicated old man would do. I went shopping, but not for socks. Oh no, I went to the most intimidating, chrome-plated, smell-like-money and gasoline place I could find, a custom motorcycle shop. A young man with more tattoos than teeth greeted me. "Help you, Pops?" "I need a trike," I announced. "A trike?" he said, looking me up and down as if assessing my ability to handle a particularly aggressive shopping cart. "Yes, a three-wheeled motorcycle, but I don't want one of those boring, sensible ones. I want it loud. I want it obnoxious. I want it painted the exact shade of 'I told you so,' and I want a sidecar." His eyes lit up. This was a man who appreciated a challenge. "What's the sidecar for?" "For my dog," I said. I don't have a dog, but the thought of riding around with an empty sidecar, a silent testament to my glorious independence, appealed to me greatly. I put down a deposit that would have given Mark a case of the vapors and left the shop feeling 10 years younger. The wind in my non-existent hair was going to feel fantastic. But my main mission was still ahead. I finally called Tim and Sarah Miller, the vegan cheese monarchs of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Sarah answered, her voice a nervous squeak. "Mr. Oldman, we saw the news. This is all so overwhelming." "I'll bet," I said cheerfully. "Listen, kids, I'm not calling to cause trouble. I'm calling to make an offer. I'd like to buy the cabin back from you." There was a stunned silence. Buy it back, but the oil." "I don't want the oil," I said. "I want the cabin, the wood, the stones, the leaky roof. I'll pay you fair market value for the structure and 1 acre of land. Just the 1 acre. You can keep the other 49 acres and the several billion dollars in crude oil beneath them." I could practically hear their brains short-circuiting through the phone. They were being offered a way to keep 98% of the fortune while getting rid of the worthless building they never wanted in the first place. It was a no-brainer. We'd have to think about it," Tim stammered. "Take your time," I said. "But just so you know, my offer includes one more thing, my services as a consultant." "Consultant?" Sarah asked. "On the history of the land," I explained. "The best fishing spots, where the blueberries grow, which floorboards creak the loudest so you can avoid them when you're sneaking in late. The important stuff that a geological survey misses." There was another long pause, followed by muffled, excited whispering. They were going to take it. Of course they were. They got to be billionaires without the guilt of displacing a sentimental old man, and I got my home back. I hung up, a profound sense of satisfaction settling over me. I was getting my sanctuary back, purified now of the taint of my daughter's greed. It would be just me, the whispering pines, and the distant rhythmic thump of oil pumps that were paying for the most expensive I win button in history. And maybe, just maybe, I'd get a dog to put in that sidecar. The final pieces of my master plan clicked into place with the satisfying sound of a well-oiled lock. The Millers, now officially the richest hippies in Appalachia, happily signed over 1 acre and the cabin back to me for a sum that was, to them, literal pocket change. They were too busy planning their ethically sourced, solar-powered bubble mansion to care about my little patch of nostalgia. The day I got the keys back, I didn't go straight to the cabin. I went to the animal shelter. I found him in the last kennel, a one-eyed, three-legged beagle mix, with a graying muzzle and a demeanor that suggested he'd also had a rough few years. The tag on his cage said his name was Gus. "He's a bit of a grump," the volunteer warned, "and he snores." "Perfect," I said. "He'll fit right in." I bought a dog bed, a bag of food, and a tiny leather aviator hat that I immediately put on Gus's head. He gave me a look of profound, one-eyed disappointment, which I chose to interpret as gratitude. Then we rode. My obnoxiously loud "I told you so" red trike rumbled to life, Gus in his sidecar, his ears flapping in the wind like tiny disapproving flags. We must have been a sight, a grizzled old man and his disgruntled, disabled dog, rolling through town on a machine that screamed midlife crisis, except I was about 30 years too late for that. We didn't go to the cabin right away. Oh no, we had one stop to make first, Chloe's house. I pulled up with a theatrical roar of the engine. Gus let out a single, bored woof. Chloe came to the window, her face a perfect mask of horror and confusion. I gave her a jaunty wave and a wide grin. Mark appeared behind her, pointing at Gus's tiny aviator hat, as if it were a declaration of war. I didn't stop. I didn't say a word. I just let the image sink in. Dad, free, happy, and undeniably gloriously weird without them. Then I twisted the throttle and rumbled away, leaving them in a cloud of exhaust and existential dread. Finally, Gus and I arrived at Whispering Pines. The sold sign was gone. The door was mine to open. I carried Gus up the porch steps. His 3 legs made stairs and negotiation, and we settled into the old rocking chair, the one Clara had loved. It was quiet. The good kind of quiet. The pines were indeed whispering, and for the first time in a year, I could hear what they were saying. They were saying, "Welcome home, you stubborn old coot." Gus snored at my feet. In the distance, if I listened very closely, I could just make out the faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the oil pumps on the miller's land. It wasn't an annoying sound. It was the sound of my freedom. The soundtrack to the best revenge I could have ever concocted, a life lived entirely on my own terms. I looked down at Gus. "What do you think, partner? Should we get a satellite dish? Maybe one of those fancy coffee makers?" Gus farted in his sleep. It was a robust, confident sound. I took that as a yes.